Conan Christopher O'Brien was born on April 18, 1963 in Brookline, Massachusetts. His father, Thomas Francis, is a physician and professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School, where he specialized in epidemiology. His mother, Ruth, is a retired attorney and former partner at the Boston firm Ropes & Gray. O'Brien has 3 brothers and 2 sisters. O'Brien attended Brookline High School, where he served as the managing editor of the school newspaper, then called the Sagamore. He was a congressional intern for Congressman Robert Drinan and Barney Frank, and in his senior year won the National Council of Teachers of English writing contest with the short story To Bury the Living. After graduating as valedictorian in 1981, O'Brien entered Harvard University. He lived in Holworthy Hall during his first year with future businessman Louis Zubinas and 2 other roommates, and in Mather House during his 3 upper-class years. He majored in history and literature and graduated magna cum laude with a Bachelor's of Arts degree in 1985. O'Brien's senior thesis, entitled Literary Progeria in the Works of William Faulkner and Flannery O'Connor, concerned the use of children as symbols in the roles of William Faulkner and Flannery O'Connor. During college, O'Brien briefly played drums in a band called the Bad Clams and was a writer for the Harvard Lampoon Humor magazine. During his sophomore and junior years, he served as the Lampoon's president, and at the time, O'Brien's future boss on NBC, Jeff Zucker, was serving as the president of the school newspaper, the Harvard Crimson. After graduating from Harvard, O'Brien moved to Los Angeles to join the writing staff of HBO's sketch comedy series Not Necessarily the News, where he worked for 2 seasons. Around this time, he started taking improvisation classes with Cynthia Sigeti and the Groundlings. His next job as a writer was on the short-lived The Wilton North Report. In January of 1988, Saturday Night Live executive producer Lorne Michaels hired O'Brien as a writer. During his 3 years on Saturday Night Live, he wrote such recurring sketches as Mr. Short-Term Memory and The Girl Watchers. The latter was first performed by Tom Hanks and John Lovitz. While on a writer's strike from SNL following the 1987-88 season, O'Brien put on an improvisational comedy review in Chicago with fellow SNL writers Bob Odenkirk and Rob Smigel called Happy Happy Good Show. While living in Chicago, O'Brien briefly shared an apartment with Jeff Garlin near Wrigley Field, and in 1989, O'Brien and his fellow SNL writers received an Emmy Award for Outstanding Writing for a Variety Series. O'Brien, like many SNL writers, occasionally appeared as extras in sketches. His most notable appearance was as a doorman in a sketch in which Tom Hanks was introduced into the SNL Five Timers Club for hosting his 5th episode in 1990. O'Brien and Robert Smigel wrote the television pilot for Look Well starring Adam West, which aired on NBC in 1991. Even with support from NBC president Brandon Tartikoff, the pilot never went to series. Despite the negative reviews, it became a cult hit. In 1991, after the failure of his sitcom, O'Brien also had an engagement to be married fall through, and he quit Saturday Night Live, citing burnout. Mike Reiss and Al Jean, then showrunners on The Simpsons, called O'Brien and offered him a job. The series was prestigious in the writing community at the time. O'Brien recalls everyone wanted to be on that show, but they never hired. O'Brien was one of the first hires after the show's original crew, and with the help of an old Groundlings friend, actress Lisa Kudrow, O'Brien purchased an apartment in Beverly Hills. He and Kudrow became romantically involved as well, and Kudrow believed that he should begin performing rather than writing. O'Brien disagreed, feeling that Kudrow was flattering him, and asserting he was happy as a writer. From 1991 to 1993, O'Brien was a writer and producer for The Simpsons. When O'Brien first arrived at the Fox lot, they temporarily gave him writer Jeff Martin's office. O'Brien was nervous and self-conscious, feeling that he would embarrass himself in front of what he regarded as an intimidating collector of writers. O'Brien would pitch characters in the voices, and he thought that was the norm, until Reese informed him no one does this. He fit in quickly, commanding control of the room frequently. O'Brien wrote some of the show's most acclaimed episodes, Marge vs. the Monorail and Homer Goes to College. The show was initially a higher realistic family sitcom after O'Brien's debut. The show took a rapid shift in the direction of the surreal. O'Brien also had sole writing credits on New Kids on the Block and Treehouse of Horror 4, on which he wrote the episode Wraparounds. Wally Wolodarski described a room character Conan put on for the writers. Conan used to do this thing called the nervous writer that involved him opening a can of Diet Coke and then nervously pitching a joke. He would spray Diet Coke all over himself, and that was always a source of endless amusement among us. During his time at The Simpsons, O'Brien also had a side project working with Smigel on the script for a musical film based off the Hans and Franz sketch from SNL, but the film was never produced. Meanwhile, David Letterman was preparing to leave NBC's Late Night, prompting executive producer Lorne Michaels to search for a new host. Michaels approached O'Brien to produce, then agent Gavin Polone said that O'Brien wanted to perform rather than produce. He arranged with Michaels that O'Brien would do a test audition on the stage of The Tonight Show. Jason Alexander and Mimi Rogers were the guests, and the audience was composed of Simpsons writers. The performance was beamed by satellite to NBC, where Lorne Michaels and NBC executives watched.
I like how models do that all the time, because it is physically very hard work. It's not that bad.
You've done a lot, okay.
I've done a lot of catalog stuff, mostly.
See, it is hard work, long hours.
No, it seems, like it would be hard. No, it doesn't. People always say it's tough to be like a model. No, like turning a big crank is tough.
I'm not talking about that.
It is. First of all, again, thank you for coming.
How could I miss an opportunity like this?
No. It's not often you get to share camera time with me.
There you go.
That's the end of my mock show. If that's all I ever get, it was a lot of fun. I had a good time. Thank you very much. Good night.
The audition was not well received by media commentators, citing his awkward humor. O'Brien was picked up as the new host on April 26, 1993.
We found a gentleman. He just signed a contract a couple hours ago? Hours ago. Just found out about this. The gentleman who is a writer on Saturday Night Live, won an Emmy. Right, won an Emmy on Saturday Night Live. Works on The Simpsons. Lauren Michaels, who you know from Saturday Night Live, will be producing the show. And I thought, come by. Nobody knows this guy. Nobody's seen him. And I thought you might want to say hello to him. It's Mr. Conan O'Brien. Come on out here. How you doing? Good to see you. Thanks a lot. No. How old are you? What, you're 29?
I just turned 30, actually.
Well, that's pretty good. I was still at Chuckles when I was 30, so that's good. See, I'm a geek. Are you excited about this? Is it fun?
Yeah, well, I found out about 8 hours ago. I was, eating a big sandwich, and they called me on the phone and said, I had this job. This is seriously true. And I'm thrilled.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something I've wanted to do all my life. I'm ecstatic.
And, right here tonight is, your first time on TV.
Well...
And
yeah.
Dave Letterman is a legend here at NBC, and if there's anything that's fun to do, it's replacing legends at NBC. I know. Oh, yeah. Oh, man.
During pre-production, writer Robert Smigel suggested fellow writer Andy Richter to sit beside O'Brien and act as a sidekick. As the writers headed to the voice record for Homer Goes to College, O'Brien received a call from Pallone informing him of the decision. He was passed out, face down into this horrible shag carpet. He was just quiet and comatose down there on the carpet, recalled post-production supervisor Michael Mendel. I remember looking at him and saying, wow, your life is about to change in a really dramatic way. Fox, however, would not let O'Brien out of his contract. Eventually, NBC and O'Brien split the cost to get him out of the contract. After O'Brien's departure, the writers at The Simpsons would watch videotaped episodes of Late Night at Lunch that day following the show and their midnight broadcast and analyzing them. Late Night with Conan O'Brien premiered on September 13, 1993 to unfavorable reviews from contemporary critics. This reception was not completely unsurprising. There was significant public apprehension due to O'Brien being virtually unknown to the public, and O'Brien himself wrote a self-deprecating New York Times piece titled O'Brien Flops on the day of the show's premiere. Critics attacked O'Brien. Tom Shales suggested that the host resumed his previous identity, Conan Oblivion. Generally, critics viewed O'Brien as nervous and fidgety on camera, and that he was way too smart, too East Coast, too sophisticated, too young, and even too tall to be successful. The show was consistently at risk for getting canceled. At one low point in 1994, NBC threatened to put him on a week-to-week contract. Executives were anxious to replace him with Greg Kinnear, who followed O'Brien with later at 1:30. Interns filled empty seats in the audience when affiliates began to inquire about replacement host. In one installment after a short stretch of reruns, sidekick Andy Richter described his vacation activities as follows. I sat back and reminded myself what it's like to be unemployed. The in-joke alluded to the rumors floating in the trades that NBC was near canceling the program. Late Night under O'Brien slowly but steadily acquired commercial and critical success. Sketches grew in popularity, such as If They Made It, Desk Drive, and In the Year 2000. A reliable staple involved a TV screen lowered behind O'Brien's desk and displaying a still photo of a news figure. The lips and voices of these characters, Clutch Cargo, features a party-crazed hillbilly interpretation of Bill Clinton, which was supplied by writing partner Robert Smigel. The turning point for the show was David Letterman's February 1994 appearance. O'Brien said it was a morale boost. I'm thinking, if the guy who created the 12:30 thing comes on and says we're smart and funny, let's go. The show went through a wobble in January 1995 when Robert Smigel, feeling burnt out, quit as a head writer. An increase in quality over time, perceived by some observers, was something credited to a growth in O'Brien's comedic performance. Within a year, the comedic formula began to arise. The show would combine the lewd and wacky with more elegant narrative-driven remotes. One famous remote was when Conan visited an historic Civil War-era baseball league. The piece was one of O'Brien's personal favorites, later remarking, "When I leave this earth at the funeral, just show this because this pretty much says who I'm all about." O'Brien's audience grew steadily as the show began to best competitors in the ratings and continued to do so for 15 seasons. In the early days of the internet, fans launched unofficial websites compiling precise summaries of each episode. Even Tom Shales was a convert. He called the show one of the most amazing transformations in television history. Beginning in 1996, O'Brien and the late-night writing team were nominated annually at the Emmy Awards for Best Writing in a Comedy Series, winning the award for the first and only time in 2007. In 1997, 2000, 2002, 2003, and 2004, the writing staff won the Writers Guild Award for Best Writing in a Comedy Variety Series, and in 2001, he formed his own TV company called Conaco, which subsequently shared in the production credits for Late Night. That same year, he returned to host Saturday Night Live during its 26th season. As of October 2005, Late Night with Conan O'Brien had 11 years consistently attracting an audience averaging around 2.5 million viewers. In 2006, O'Brien exploited his personal resemblance to Taraj Hanlon, entering her second term as the president of Finland. Capitalizing on the resemblance and on the 2006 Finnish presidential election, O'Brien and Late Night aired mock political ads both in support of Halonen and against her main opponent, Sauli Niinistö, who influenced popular perception of the race, which Halonen eventually won. O'Brien traveled to Finland shortly after the election. "We took the show to Helsinki for 5 days, where we were embraced like a national treasure. As part of the 5-day trip, which was released as a 1-hour special episode of Late Night, O'Brien met with Halonen at the Finnish presidential palace. During the writer's strike in 2008, O'Brien staged a mock feud with Comedy Central's Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert over a dispute about which of the three were responsible for giving a bump to Mike Huckabee's campaign to become the Republican presidential nominee. The feud crossed over with all three shows during the 2007-2008 Writers Guild strike. Near the turn of the millennium, NBC's late-night lineup, Leno at 11:30 and O'Brien at 12:35, as well as Saturday Night Live on the weekends, remained a leader in the ratings. By 2001, O'Brien's contract at NBC had less than a year left to run, and despite arguably coming into his own in the preceding years, the network was reluctant to pay him on the same scale as other late-night hosts. That year, competing network Fox mounted an extended, comprehensive campaign to lure O'Brien away from NBC, signing his appeal for a younger late-night demographic. The head of News Corporation, Peter Chernin, persuaded O'Brien personally, taking him and executive producer Jeff Ross to dinner on several occasions. Fox plan involved making O'Brien the network's signature star. His program would begin 30 minutes before Leno and Letterman's, and he would be receiving cross-promotion by its animation programming block and on Sunday NFL games. Chernin also offered the host 7 times his current pay, a jump from $3 million to $21 million. Ross, friends with NBC president and CEO Jeff Zucker, informed him that Fox was aggressively pursuing O'Brien. NBC returned with a more realistic offer, bumping up O'Brien's salary to $8 million and renewing him through 2005. While many of O'Brien's professional advisors and managers pushed for the Fox deal, O'Brien decided to possibly take over The Tonight Show after Leno made it a difficult decision. O'Brien, like many comedians, had grown up idolizing Carlson's incarnation. Numerous NBC executives, including President Bob Bright, were optimistic that O'Brien would stay despite other networks being interested in signing him. Chernin warned O'Brien that waiting along for Leno to leave would be destructive to his late-night TV career. Nevertheless, O'Brien signed a new deal with NBC in March of 2002. The contract extended him through 2005 and most significantly contained a clause that solidified the official line of succession. If anything were to happen to Leno, O'Brien would step in. O'Brien successfully hosted the 2002 Emmy Awards, sending out the most resounding message yet about his growing strength as a performer, and a year later, NBC broadcast O'Brien's 10th anniversary special in primetime. By the time Leno's contract again came up for renewal, a decision would need to be made regarding the future of The Tonight Show. Facing the prospect of attempting to keep both Leno and O'Brien, Zucker made the final call on Leno's deal, deciding that this contract extension would be Leno's final. The plan would extend Leno for 4 additional years, after which he would give The Tonight Show to O'Brien. In February of 2004, NBC executive Mark Graboff informed Ross of the conversations, and he in turn ran with the idea of waiting for 4 more years for O'Brien, who was immediately receptive. Zucker, along with top late-night executives Rick Ludwin, met with Leno in March at its Burbank studio to discuss the contract extensions, and explained that NBC's stance on handing over the show to O'Brien. While Leno quietly felt both disappointed and befuddled, he noted that he did not want to see himself and O'Brien go through the same dilemma that he and Letterman faced 12 years earlier, and agreed to the plans. His only request was that NBC wait to announce O'Brien as host until well after the extension was signed, to which the executives agreed. When Leno handed the news professionally to the legal Zucker, he soon headed to Tonight Show's pup producer Debbie Vickers' office to let him know he felt as if he had just been fired. NBC's announcement of the renewal inevitably led to press speculation about O'Brien's fate. To that end, O'Brien and his team went from the charade, peppering interviews with unclear, vague statements about his future. Finally, on September 27, 2004, O'Brien officially signed on to become the next host of The Tonight Show. NBC allowed the first comment aside from the press release to come from Leno on that night's show.
Welcome back. I want to elaborate on an announcement made earlier today. You may have heard about this, that I'm going to leave the show in 2009. Okay. All right. No, let me explain. Let me explain how these things work. About 6 months ago, I sat down here with the folks at NBC, and they said, we want to re-up. And I said, okay, what do you want to do? Because I don't have a manager and agent. I like the people I work with. They're nice folks. And they said, and this is a high-paying job. Oh, it's a great-paying job. So they said, listen, we would like to do 5 more years. I said, great. I'd love to do 5 more years. And that was 6 months ago. And then time went by. There's all talk about Conan O'Brien. Will he go to ABC? Will he go to one of these other networks? And they came to me and they said, we don't want to lose Conan O'Brien. And I said, oh, okay, what does that mean? And they said, we think Conan would be a good replacement, as I do. Conan is a gentleman, funny, the hottest late-night guy out there, excellent. And I said, you know something? I don't want to see Conan go anywhere else. And I'm proud to say this show has been #1. We will keep it #1. And then in 2009, I'll say, Conan, take it over, it's yours. Because, you know, when I took this show over, boy, there was a lot of animosity between me and Dave and who's going to get it. And quite frankly, a lot of what I thought, well, good friendships were permanently damaged. And I don't want to see anybody ever have to go through that again. Because this show is like a dynasty. You hold it, and then you hand it off to the next person. And I don't want to see all the fighting and all, and who's better, and nasty things back and forth in the press. So right now, here it is. Conan, it's yours. See you in 5 years, buddy. Okay.
Remember this. This will come into play later. In private conversations, Leno likened his removal from The Tonight Show to the end of a relationship, noting that he was loyal and still ended up heartbroken. From his perspective, NBC's decision made no sense, as the show had remained #1 in the ratings and consistently brought in money. He began frequently lamenting his confusion to producer Vickers, explaining that he was sick of lying when people inquired about his retirement. Eventually, Leno began mulling over his own options after Tonight, telling his staff that after the transition, they could move the show to another network like ABC, whose Disney lot was not too far away from their current Burbank studio. His frustration with the situation came across in his nightly monologues, as more jokes regarding NBC's 4th place position in the ratings, as well as jokes regarding the future transition, began to appear. While NBC executives tended to not worry in the immediate years following the decision, by 2007, Zucker began to ponder what losing Leno might mean for the network. Around the time, Fox and ABC began conveying interest in holding discreet conversations with Leno. Among the offers made to Leno by NBC's competitors was from Sony Pictures for a syndicated program. In early 2008, Zucker began to make trips to the Burbank studios in an effort to keep Leno. He gave him numerous suggestions, including a Bob Hope-type deal with high-profile specials, a Sunday night primetime show, and even a nightly cable show on USA Network. Executives began to entertain an ideal situation, paying off O'Brien and retaining Leno, but Zucker viewed that idea as outrageous. By the time NBC had already broken ground on a new studio for O'Brien's Tonight Show, renovating Stage 1 at the Universal Studios lot in Universal City for $50 million. During a spring lunch meeting with Ross, NBC Sports chair Dick Ebersol advised that O'Brien retire silly antics and focus more on pitching the show to Middle America, which would involve stretching out his monologue. O'Brien, then a year away from inheriting The Tonight Show, was indeed lengthening his monologue, but viewers suggested from Lugwin as largely unnecessary, desiring to put his own stamp on the show's tradition. By this point, O'Brien's high popularity at the time on the contract signing had gone down slightly. He'd opted not to change his act to suit a more mainstream audience than NBC imagined he would. And CBS's Craig Ferguson, who occurred the post-Letterman slot as the host of The Late Late Show, had begun to occasionally beat O'Brien in overall ratings. Though internal anxiety increased among executives, most tended to still support O'Brien. Zucker's last resort for Leno was a nightly 10 p.m. program. He imagined a nightly Leno show in that time slot could perhaps turn around NBC's primetime ratings decline. On December 8, 2008, Leno verbally agreed to stay at the network, producing a nightly 10 p.m. variety show titled The Jay Leno Show, and phoned ABC and Fox to inform them. Zucker and Lenwood planned to meet with O'Brien later to explain the deal, but as word leaked out to the New York Times, they decided to meet with him directly following that night's show. Following that meeting, Ross and O'Brien met with writers and mulled over the decision. O'Brien instantly felt uneasy, but as he was still in essence receiving The Tonight Show, he remained calm. The final episode of Late Night with Conan O'Brien aired on February 20th, 2009, followed by The Tonight Show with Jay Leno on May 29th. Most of O'Brien's entire staff moved cross-country to Los Angeles to prepare his version of The Tonight Show. He and his staff threw themselves into developing the program, but remained concerned regarding NBC's commitment to the new Tonight Show's incarnation. Meanwhile, senior-level executives at NBC predicted that Leno's show would be roundly beaten by hour-long dramas on competing networks and cable, dooming the network's experiment. In announcing his 10 p.m. show on The Tonight Show, Leno said, "People are asking me, what are you going to do after the last show? Are you going to go on vacation? This kind of stuff. Actually, I'm going to a secluded spot where no one can find me. NBC Primetime. As most of you know, we're not really leaving. We're coming back at 10 o'clock in September. It's a gamble. It's a gamble. I'm betting everything that NBC will still be around in 3 months. That is not a given."
I'd like to say something about Mr. Jay Leno. Jay Leno is, from day one, has called me constantly and offered his support. Every night at the end of The Tonight Show, Jay Leno says, "Stay tuned for Conan O'Brien." He has done that since 1993. I owe that man a great deal, and so my thanks to Jay Leno for all he's done for me.
From Universal Studios in Hollywood, it's The Tonight Show with Conan O'Brien.
The Tonight Show with Conan O'Brien premiered on June 1st, 2009. The show's opening began with a nod to The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, beginning with the classic Laramie Peacock logo used during the 1960s and 1970s, and the announcement that the following program is brought to you in living color on NBC. In the cold open, O'Brien was shown preparing to host his first episode of The Tonight Show, going over a list of things that needed to be done, but realizing he was still in New York and had forgotten that they needed to move to Los Angeles. After trying and failing to catch a taxi cab, Conan ran across the country through such places as Amish Country, Wrigley Field in Chicago, the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, the Teton Range in Las Vegas, and the deserts of Arizona before arriving at Universal Studios Hollywood to host the show. Upon arrival, Conan realizes he left his keys to the new studios in New York and then drove a bulldozer through the door and the wall of the studio to get in. The Cheap Trick song Surrender was played over the sketch. Other film sketches in the first episode included a trip through the streets of Los Angeles on the Universal Studios tram, a ride through Hollywood with Conan behind the wheels of his 1992 Ford Taurus show, and a short gag showing Conan in the back row of a Los Angeles Lakers playoff game at Staples Center. On June 23, 2009, the show's first segment ended with a tribute to former Tonight Show announcer and sidekick Ed McMahon, who had died earlier in the day. On September 23, 2009, during his opening monologue, O'Brien told a very brief joke about Newark as a supposed healthcare program for the city's citizens that would involve Newark giving them a bus ticket out of the city. Newark Mayor Cory Booker responded in a satirical YouTube video calling for O'Brien to apologize and that Conan would be banned from ever entering Newark Liberty International Airport until doing so. Conan responded by further making fun of Newark, however, saying that the only way he can get to Newark now would be like everyone else, through a series of poor decisions. He also called out Cory Booker to come on the show to air out their grievances, deciding to then ban Booker from Burbank Airport, adding later that he had absolutely no power to do so. Booker subsequently banned Conan from the state of New Jersey as well as the sister cities of Newark. In response, O'Brien read a letter on the air from Elizabeth, New Jersey Mayor Chris Bolwich, declaring that he would temporarily rename Terminal A of Newark Liberty the Conan O'Brien Terminal. Conan continued, saying that he would create a geographical toilet seat around Newark. The mayor of Bayonne, East Orange, Kearny, Jersey City, and Elizabeth had publicly sided with Conan O'Brien. He then said, "Your move, Mayor Booker." The feud was unofficially ended when Secretary of State Hillary Clinton called for it to end during a prepared comedy bit, telling Booker to chalk it up to Conan. The following week, Conan announced that Cory Booker would be a guest on the October 16, 2009 show to mend the feud. That night, O'Brien and his wife donated $50,000 to the New York Now organization, and NBCUniversal matched Conan's donation to a total of a $100,000 gift. Booker also admitted that he is a big Conan fan and often tapes shows to watch the next day or watches them on the website Hulu. On September 25, 2009, O'Brien suffered from a mild concussion after he slipped and hit his head while running a race, as part of a comedy sketch with guest Terry Hatcher. He was examined at a hospital and released the same day. A rerun was aired that night, but O'Brien returned to work the following Monday and poked fun of the incident before showing a clip of the occurrence in its entirety. The episode was never completed. Second guest Seth MacFarlane and musical guest Rodrigo Gabriela returned for the next week's shows.
It's the Jay Leno Show!
On September 14th, 2009, The Jay Leno Show premiered at 10 p.m. The Jay Leno Show was met with mixed reception from critics who felt that the show had little differentiation from Leno's Tonight Show. Others were critical of NBC's decision to give up an hour of its weeknight lineup to Leno, due to the network's past success with dramas airing in the 10 p.m. time slot. One NBC affiliate notably planned not to air the show at all, although the decision was retracted due to complaints by the network. Although viewership of The Jay Leno Show was initially on par with NBC's projections by November, the program's ratings began to fall significantly. NBC affiliates complained that the declining viewership of The Jay Leno Show also had a ripple effect on the viewership of their late local newscasts. Ratings for NBC affiliates' local news broadcasts at 11 p.m. began to slip by mid-October, especially on NBC-owned and operated stations in the largest markets, creating high anxiety for the network. The Tonight Show still retained a slightly higher share of the coveted 18 to 34 demographic against Letterman, but saw those numbers slip even more when Jay Leno's show began. Affiliates began to complain, and in addition to the domino effect on the local news, O'Brien and his 12:30 successor, Jimmy Fallon, the disastrous ratings for NBC and its existing primetime lineups came from Leno. This cascading effect caused by the lowered 10 p.m. lead-in was so significant that local NBC affiliate news viewership fell an average of 25% nationwide, with a decline in some markets being as high as 50%. By November, 2 months after the debut of The Jay Leno Show, ratings for The Tonight Show were brought down to roughly 2 million viewers a night year to year, from when Leno had hosted the program. Clearing the 10 p.m. time period for Leno also damaged relationships with the producers of scripted shows that previously occurred the slot, such as Dick Wolf of Law & Order. Leno offered an October 29th interview to Broadcasting and Cable, where he stated that he would return to his original 11:35 time slot if offered by NBC. When O'Brien's sidekick and announcer Andy Richter called the move less than classy in a chat with TV Squad, Leno called Ludwig to complain.
And, and there was all kinds of talk about our ratings not being very good, but they were pretty good all summer.
Sure.
And then our lead-in changed.
Right.
And they weren't so good anymore.
It's very hard, I would think, to have a lead-in for a nighttime talk show that is a nighttime talk show.
Yes.
As most programs went into repeats in December, Leno's staff, notably Vickers, had focused on grabbing big-name guests for that month in an effort to save The Jay Leno Show. Those efforts were cut short when she was informed they had until the end of November. Affiliates began calling the network to inquire about the show's fate, and research analysis revealed O'Brien's drastically reduced median age for The Tonight Show, age 56 to 46, could possibly reflect that he was too niche for the earlier time. Any effort to take Leno off the air was halted by his contract, which had a highly unusual pay-or-play provision, in contrast to the typical pay-or-play agreement, which guaranteed NBC would both air his program and pay him up to 2 years. On November 6, NBC Chairman Jeff Gaspin received an email from the sales division with a suggestion to cancel O'Brien and reinstate Leno as the host of The Tonight Show. Upon Gaspin's legal interpretation of Leno's contract, the option to simply move Leno back to The Tonight Show became relevant. When very poor ratings came in for the November sweeps period, affiliates became alarmed, and NBC board members demanded something be done regarding the 10 p.m. lead-in. If something was not done by January, the affiliates reasoned they would instate syndicated programming or move up their news broadcast to pre up The Jay Leno Show. Ludwig, Gaspin, and Zucker kicked around possible suggestions for the dilemma, such as cutting Leno to a few nights per week. In an attempt to alienate the situation, Vickers moved the most popular comedy segments to the second half of The Jay Leno Show, moving the 10 at 10 segments later in the broadcast. Gaspin appeared suggesting to put Leno back at 11:35 and soon began working on a plan to cut The Jay Leno Show to a half hour, leading into Conan's Tonight Show around midnight. From their perspective, the biggest casualty in the scenario would be Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, which would get bumped to 1 a.m. The reconfigured lineup could start in March of 2010, following NBC's coverage of the Winter Olympics. Zucker preferred a plan for Leno to include an occasional guest and comedy piece, while Ebersol favored returning the way it was before, with Leno at 11:35 and O'Brien at 12:35. Gaspin laid out his plan to Zucker 1 week before Christmas, but both agreed to wait it out for the new year, as to not ruin anybody's holiday season. The plan moved forward after confirmation that O'Brien's contract did not guarantee a strict 11:35 start time, a loophole included primarily to accommodate sports preemptions and specials, such as the network's New Year's coverage. Gaspin planned to disclose the news to Leno first, and then, if all went well, inform O'Brien the following week. When Gaspin laid out the proposal to Leno and Vickers, the response was positive, even though they questioned how such a plan would work. Gaspin reasoned that the company was in a desperate situation, and he indicated his confidence in O'Brien that he would go along with the changes too. While Leno embraced the plan, Vickers was unnerved. Without a guest or musical act, she might not even have a studio audience, which could have disastrous consequences for Leno. In order to meet with O'Brien the following Monday, Gaspin was forced to cancel a meeting with the affiliate board, but promised them that by doing so, he would have an answer to the 10 p.m. problem that would be satisfactory to the board. After his January 6th show, O'Brien met with manager Gavin Pallone to share his anxieties regarding the ratings. "I just think Leno is going to hurt me in some way." News regarding Leno leaked to pop culture site FTV Live by the following morning, which was then picked up by national publications, including the Los Angeles Times and the New York Times. Gaspin scheduled an immediate meeting with Ross and O'Brien as soon as they arrived and explained the proposed changes. "I know how hard I've worked for this," responded O'Brien. "It was promised to me. I had a shitty lead-in." Following the tense 15-minute meeting, O'Brien and Ross returned to the Tonight Studios. TMZ reported on the story with a headline reading, "NBC Shakeup, Jay Leno comes out on top." O'Brien called an emergency staff meeting and assured that they had not been canceled and all would be fine. The TMZ story deeply bothered O'Brien, owing to its timing soon after a story reporting the Jay Leno show's cancellation, and he and Ross reasoned that they indeed were the last to be told of the changes. By the following morning, O'Brien and Ross determined that they would have to leave NBC, and O'Brien opened that night's show with, "We've got a great show for you tonight. I have no idea when it will air, but it's going to be a pretty great show." Pallone viewed the move as a reactionary one by Zucker, concluding that he was acting in self-preservation, since network owner General Electric was in the process of negotiating the acquisition of NBCUniversal by Comcast. When a story ran that night on the New York Times website that Fox had an overt interest in O'Brien and was not going along with the plan, Zucker reasoned that Pallone was to blame. The situation became heated when Zucker placed a call to O'Brien's agent Rick Rosen, inquiring on the story and demanding an immediate answer from the O'Brien camp. Gaspin spoke about the situation at a previously scheduled press conference that Sunday, noting that, "I obviously couldn't satisfy either with 100% of what they wanted. That's why I came up with this compromise." Zucker, upon hearing that O'Brien still did not take the proposal well, threatened Rosen, saying, "I'm going to tell you right now that I can pay him or play him. I can ice you guys." On the following Monday's show, O'Brien continued jokes on the subject, responding to thunderous applause. He joked, "You keep that up and this monologue won't start until 12:05. Rosen suggested that O'Brien's camp hire litigation lawyer Patty Glazer to help grasp the situation. Following discussions on Leno's contract during a post-show conference, Glazer turned her attention to O'Brien for his opinion. He expressed his desire to write a statement describing his feelings on the matter, and after hearing what he would possibly say in such a statement, Glazer agreed to the idea, although Ross was initially reluctant. O'Brien went without sleep that night, crafting his statement obsessively. He returned to the studio the following morning, listening as the lawyers and Glazer read over the statement, which remained largely unchanged before publication. According to the book The War for Late Night, Glazer found the statement as ideal for their purposes. It laid out Conan's point of view unequivocally, but without compromising his legal options. Nothing in there overtly said he was quitting, saying that he could not be accused of forsaking his contractual obligations. O'Brien's press release went out midday on January 12, 2010, which he addressed to People of Earth. For 60 years, The Tonight Show was aired immediately following the late local news. I sincerely believe that delaying The Tonight Show into the next day to accommodate another comedy program will seriously damage what I consider to be the greatest franchise in the history of broadcasting. The Tonight Show at 12:05 simply isn't The Tonight Show. So it has come to this. I cannot express in words how much I enjoy hosting this program and what an enormous personal disappointment it is for me to consider losing it. My staff and I have worked unbelievably hard, and we are very proud of our contribution to the legacy of The Tonight Show. But I cannot participate in what I honestly believe in its destruction.
You think Conan will go for that? Yes. Yes.
You want me to move The Tonight Show to 12:05? Forget it. I'm not doing it. Go to hell!
Public and media reaction to the press release was positive, with the New York Times stating O'Brien held Leno personally responsible for the conflict. According to The War for Late Night, the People of Earth letter, the manifesto as NBC came to call it, changed the tone. This wasn't just Conan saying no, it was Conan saying no, and you're wrong, and by the way, go fuck yourself. A turning point in the conflict came on January 13th as O'Brien joked in his monologue.
Hosting The Tonight Show has been the fulfillment of a lifelong dream for me. And I just want to say to the kids out there watching, you can do anything you want in life. Yeah, unless Jay Leno wants to do it too.
Following the joke, Leno called Gaspin asking, "Why the fuck am I giving up a half hour for this guy?" Conversations changed to focus on what O'Brien would require to resolve the matter, and parties began to discuss a settlement. Discussions neared completion regarding a financial settlement by January 14th and were expected to be in place following O'Brien's final week of shows during the week of January 18th, a concession O'Brien pushed to give his program a proper farewell. Movement on the settlement slowed when run by GE executives, then owners of NBCUniversal. NBC had several requests, among those he not bring Howard Stern on the show his final week, and that they see the show's final week of scripts. Talks for much of the rest of the week went nowhere, and a Saturday New York Post story ran claiming that O'Brien's staff felt betrayed by his actions, as they did not understand his refusal to accept the 12:05 time slot in order to keep the jobs and was driven by egocentric concerns. O'Brien was infuriated by the story, which he assumed to be a direct plan from NBC, as nearly all the staff agreed that he should leave the network. He was personally appalled that NBC challenged his character, as stressing severance for his employees was enormously important to him. He had paid them out of his own pocket during the writer's strike 3 years earlier. NBC added more requests, which the O'Brien camp refused as unreasonable, such as the right to pull any of his final shows if the network objected to the content. GE Chairman Jeffrey Immelt questioned why they were paying so much for a performer destined to run to another network. Negotiations continued into O'Brien's final week. He could not confirm on air it was indeed his final week of shows, which produced difficulties in booking the guests he desired for his final show. On January 19th, multiple media outlets reported that O'Brien and NBC were close to signing a deal between $30 and $40 million for the host to walk away from the network. Following the January 20th episode, O'Brien remained at the studio until the early morning hours alongside executive producer Jeff Frost and the legal counsel trying to finalize the settlement. O'Brien wandered off, playing his guitar alone and stepping out into the deserted Universal lot at midnight, attempting to make sense of the situation. O'Brien signed the agreement that night, and the next day, its terms were made public. In all, O'Brien would receive a $45 million deal to leave NBC. He received pay for the remaining 2 years of his contract, with additional payments to Ross, Richter, and Weinberg. The severance pay for his staff was around $12 million, which O'Brien had stressed. O'Brien paid around 50 stagehands and various crew members at least 6 weeks severance pay out of his own pocket, and NBC gave those particular staffers nothing in the settlement. The International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees stated that they were very happy with how O'Brien treated the union members during the conflict. The contract contained a clause prohibiting O'Brien from making negative remarks about NBC for a certain amount of time. It did not, however, contain the previously rumored mitigation clause, in which NBC would be able to keep some of the severance package after O'Brien found a new network. It stipulated that he could not return to television on another network no earlier than September 1st of 2010. The conflict only provided more comedy material for O'Brien's Tonight Show during its final episodes. Among other bits, O'Brien put the show up for sale on Craigslist and then himself. Looking back at clips from the show's 7-month tenure that were dubbed classic Tonight Show moments, and designed a bit to seem as though he was spending absurd amounts of NBC's money, such as customizing a Bugatti Veyron, playing audio and video clips with expensive rebroadcasting rights, and using a purported rare ground sloth to display beluga caviar on what was presented as an original Picasso. Because the segment aired in days immediately following the 2010 Haiti earthquake, while national fundraising efforts, including some spearheaded by NBC, were ongoing, O'Brien received criticism for wasting resources. In response to the outcry over the expense of those sketches, O'Brien explained that the segments were indeed jokes, and many of the props were either counterfeits or borrowed in exchange for promotional consideration. The guest roster for O'Brien's final show on January 22nd included Tom Hanks, Steve Carell, who did an exit interview of O'Brien in character as an NBC employee and shredded Conan's ID badge, and his original first guest, Will Ferrell, was regarded by O'Brien as a dream lineup. In addition, Neil Young performed his song, Long May You Run, and as the show closed, was joined by O'Brien, Beck, Ferrell, and dressed as Ronnie Van Zant, Billy Gibbons, Ben Harper, Vivica Paulin, and the Tonight Show Band to perform the Leonard Skinner song, Freebird. In his final moments on the air, O'Brien stated that between Saturday Night Live, Late Night, and The Tonight Show, he had worked for NBC for over 20 years, and he was enormously proud of the work that they had done together. He then thanked NBC for the first time since announcing his intention to quit. O'Brien said his decision was the hardest thing he ever had to do. He praised and gave thanks to staff and thanked his fans for their overwhelming support, especially those who participated in the Los Angeles rallies during periods of heavy rain. He ended the show by offering heartfelt advice to his viewers in his farewell address, stating, "All I ask of you is one thing. I ask this particularly of the young people who watch. Please don't be cynical. I hate cynicism. For the record, it's my least favorite quality, and it doesn't lead anywhere. Nobody in life gets exactly what they thought they were going to get. But if you work really hard and you're kind, amazing things will happen. I'm telling you, amazing things will happen." Following the taping, the studio set was used one final time for a party thrown by staff. O'Brien's monologue spot from the floor was framed and signed by his staff as a gift, which touched O'Brien. 10.3 million people watched the final episode of The Tonight Show with Conan O'Brien, a notably high number for live late-night viewing and on a Friday night. The final episode scored a 7.0 household rating and a 4.4 rating in the 1849 demographic. Not only did O'Brien's final show beat all late-night competition, it outscored all primetime shows in the 18 to 49 demo for that night and the night before. The network confirmed that Leno would officially resume as host of The Tonight Show on March 1st, and reruns from O'Brien's time as host aired on NBC until they began airing the Winter Olympics on February 15th.
Between my time at Saturday Night Live, The Late Night Show, and my brief run here on The Tonight Show, I've worked with NBC for over 20 years. Yes, we have our differences right now. Yes, we're going our separate ways. But this company has been my home for most of my adult life. I am enormously proud of the work we've done together, and I want to thank NBC for making it all possible. Every comedian dreams of hosting The Tonight Show. And for 7 months, I got to do it. And I did it my way, with people I love. I do not regret 1 second. So to all the people watching, I can never, ever thank you enough for the kindness to me. I'll think about it for the rest of my life. And all I ask is one thing, and I'm asking this particularly of young people that watch. Please do not be cynical. I hate cynicism. For the record, it's my least favorite quality. It doesn't lead anywhere. Nobody in life gets exactly what they thought they were going to get. But if you work really hard and you're kind, amazing things will happen.
It's The Tonight Show with Jay Leno.
I'm Jay Leno, your host, at least for a while. So, gotta admit, I'm a little bit nervous. Not because it's my first night back, because I know Dave and Oprah are watching. That's right, really.
Leno's first Tonight Show back pulled in 6.6 million viewers, and his margin over Letterman again held for much of the rest of his run until his second Tonight Show departure 4 years later. While his numbers were down from his original incarnation of The Tonight Show, it's as if a collective erase button was pushed, said Robert Thompson, professor of television at Syracuse University, with the usual suspects back in their usual locations, except Conan is gone. According to NBC, if O'Brien continued hosting, it would have been the first year that The Tonight Show would have actually lost money, which Leno later contended was damaging to the franchise. This assertion was scorned by skeptical critics, as it was calculated that Conan's Tonight Show would have made significantly more money in advertising than Leno's show did, due to his more favorable youth demographic numbers. In addition, higher production costs and higher salaries would have by all accounts made Leno's Tonight Show more costly. O'Brien and Ross also challenged that notion, concluding that to arrive at such a calculation, NBC must have included the cost of building up the new studio and offices as well as startup costs. At NBC, most young executives tended to support O'Brien and joined the I'm With Coco Facebook groups. NBC later asked all employees to rescind their membership in any O'Brien-supported pages. Similar action came when NBC removed reruns of O'Brien's The Tonight Show from NBC.com and Hulu. Gaspin was happy with the settlement, but nevertheless agreed with one of O'Brien's points, that his show had no time to grow. Could it have grown? Absolutely. We just couldn't give him the time. Zucker, in an interview with Charlie Rose, defended his strategy, but noted that both moving Leno to primetime and giving O'Brien The Tonight Show was a mistake. In addition, he stated that he received death threats due to his role in the conflict. Zucker, who had known O'Brien since their days at Harvard University and was very close friends with Ross, was very disappointed with how events played out, although he viewed it as necessary. Leno, in an attempt to repair his public perception, granted an interview to Oprah Winfrey on January 25th. He stripped himself of any blame for O'Brien's departure, noting that it was all about ratings, and also confirmed that he told a white lie in 2004 when he guaranteed The Tonight Show to O'Brien. In a reference to a 2007 Super Bowl commercial starring Letterman and Winfrey, the two had feuded for years prior, Letterman, Leno, and Winfrey all appeared in a Super Bowl ad during the Super Bowl in February 2010. The ad, Letterman's idea, was the first time the late-night hosts had met since their original 1992 debacle. In it, Leno and Letterman sit on opposing sides of Winfrey watching the game. Letterman deems it the worst Super Bowl party ever due to Leno's inclusion, and Winfrey tells him to be nice, resulting in Leno quipping, "Oh, he's just saying that because I'm here." The clip started a frenzy, with commentators speculating that Leno had been green screened into the picture. Letterman had initially wanted O'Brien to be in the promo as well, but O'Brien firmly rejected, saying, "No fucking way I'm doing that. It's not a joke to me. It's real." O'Brien was sure his agreement prohibited television appearances for several months, but gathered NBC would be only too happy to allow him a one-time reprieve for the ad, as it was to improve Leno's image. O'Brien, by this point, was planning a live tour with his staff that would take him on the road, and also had created a Twitter account. After about 1 hour online, O'Brien's numbers on Twitter followers had rocketed past the 30,000 followers of the official Jay Leno account, and he held over 300,000 followers in under 24 hours. He surpassed the 1 million mark in May of 2010. Many speculated that O'Brien would sign a deal with Fox for a late-night program. Comedy Central and HBO also had expressed interest in O'Brien. Fox's deal moved slowly and then eventually withdrew their offer due to station resistance, the daunting financial investment, and opposition from Roger Ailes. O'Brien eventually signed with TBS in April, with his next program, Conan, set to debut in November. The move prompted industry surprises. Online blog Vulture commented that Conan will now be featured as a lead-in for Lopez Tonight on TBS. It's not just basic cable, it's unsexy basic cable. His nationwide comedy tour, the Legally Prohibited from Being Funny on Television tour, began on April 12th and ran through June 14th. A documentary shot during that time, Conan O'Brien Can't Stop, as well as a May 60 Minutes interview, prompted some observers to deem him whiny. Vanity Fair's James Wolcott said O'Brien came off as a peevish straw of nervous energy, a self-involved chatterbox. As NBC could have possibly retained intellectual property originating from O'Brien's entire 17-year tenure with the network, O'Brien simply changed names on the tour, turning his character, the masturbating bear, into the self-pleasing panda. The Washington Post later reported that retaining the characters was not a key issue for O'Brien.
Coming to you from Warner Brothers Studios, it's Conan! Now, here he is, Conan
Conan premiered in November of 2010 to 4 million viewers, leading all late-night talk shows and more than tripling the audience of its direct competition, The Daily Show and The Colbert Report on Comedy Central. However, ratings quickly fell. By the following fall, the show was averaging 1 million viewers in the 18 to 49 demographic. In an effort to bolster ratings, TBS secured the cable syndication rights to The Big Bang Theory at a report of $2 million per episode to serve as lead-ins to Conan 3 nights a week. Steve Koonin of Turner Entertainment stated in 2012 that Conan is the centerpiece of TBS. The Hollywood Reporter credited for forging a digital empire. His company's own shows and a young audience TBS hopes will follow him anywhere. TBS announced in May of 2017 that they had renewed the show through 2022. However, despite the show's renewal, it was announced in November 2020 that the show would end in June 2021, with O'Brien producing a weekly variety show for HBO Max. His final show on Late Night aired on June 24th, 2021, with a montage of clips from his shows, along with an extended farewell monologue. Many of the executives involved in the botched transition subsequently left NBC. Zucker was fired by Comcast Executive Vice President Steve Burke, but he stressed that Comcast's insistence to install their own team was the reason. West Coast Business Operations Executive Mark Graboff opted to leave his contract early, as did Programming Executive Jeff Gaspin. While O'Brien admitted in 2012 that he occasionally still felt resentment over the events that transpired, he noted that "I had an amazing partnership with NBC and was very disappointed at the outcome." He has had no contact with Leno, noting the odds are we will both leave this earth without speaking to each other, which is fine. There's really nothing to say. We both know the deal. He knows. I know. I'd rather just forget. In the 2010 issue of TV Guide, the time slot conflict ranked number 1 on a list of TV's biggest blunders. A wax likeness of O'Brien that had been commissioned by NBCUniversal from Madame Tussauds was unveiled during a December 2009 episode of The Tonight Show and was quietly returned to the Madame Tussauds Museum on Hollywood Boulevard. The figure had originally been intended to permanently reside in the NBCUniversal Experience theme park attraction. A remote segment produced a few months into O'Brien's TBS show saw the host humorously reuniting with the wax statue. On October 5, 2011, O'Brien returned to 30 Rockefeller Plaza for a surprise scripted appearance on Late Night with Jimmy Fallon to ceremonially retrieve the Triumph the Insult comic dog puppet from the studio after NBC had finally granted him the rights to use the character on TBS's Conan. During the 2.5-minute bit, O'Brien and Fallon joked about the controversy when Fallon said, "You were host of Late Night for 16 years, then what happened?" To which O'Brien laughed and said, "Don't you worry about that. You're a young guy." During his 2012 appearance on The Late Show with David Letterman, O'Brien made it clear that he had no animosity towards NBC, pointing out that the individual executives he clashed with had departed the network shortly after he did due to a regiment change. Indeed, O'Brien would occasionally show clips from his NBC show on his TBS program with NBC's permission, and the network also allowed the character of Triumph, the insult comic dog, to appear on TBS's show as well, with Triumph's performer Robert Smigel explaining that NBC only stands to gain by allowing him to give their property exposure. In an interview with CNN's Piers Morgan Live in 2012, O'Brien acknowledged that in retrospect, the plan to engineer a transition for The Tonight Show 5 years in advance was absurd, though we know that he never anticipated Leno's ratings would fall into that interim, as the press had sometimes intimidated. And he pointed out that all previous Tonight Show hosts had departed when they were at the top of their ratings. He further remarked that he was happier in his current situation at TBS, where he feels liberated and can do the material he wants without the baggage of upholding a legacy. In 2013, O'Brien was the headline performer invited to give remarks at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and the Tonight Show controversy was humorously alluded to throughout the evening. During his own speech, President Barack Obama quipped, "I understand that when the correspondents associations were considering Conan for the gig, they were faced with the age-old dilemma. Do you offer it to him now or wait for 5 years and then give it to Jimmy Fallon?" O'Brien himself referenced the affair with a joke that complimented President Obama on job creation. Since Obama was first elected, the number of posts has doubled and the number of Tonight Show hosts has tripled. Later that year, O'Brien was chosen to host Carson on TCM, a series that aired classic interviews from The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson on Turner Classic Movies. In 2014, Leno was interviewed for 60 Minutes, where it focused on the host's second and permanent departure from The Tonight Show desk. Leno expressed to Steve Kroft that he had been blindsided in 2004 when NBC executives asked him to relinquish The Tonight Show in 5 years' time, though he admitted that he accepted the decision with no arguments or inquiry. In spite of this and the public remarks Leno had made at the time blessing O'Brien's succession, both Leno and his wife Mavis characterized The Tonight Show as having been taken from the incumbent host, rather than being something that was voluntarily surrendered. When Leno explained that he was more than willing to step aside the second time during the considerable talent of Fallon, and because talented people will only wait so long before they get other opportunities, Kroft pointed out that Leno himself said very similar things about O'Brien years before. "Well, maybe I did, yeah. Well, we'll see what happens," as Leno briefly joked. During a 2015 interview with Howard Stern, O'Brien explained that he prefers to avoid talking about the craziness, stating that people in show business shouldn't complain. He also claimed that even in hindsight, he does not regret doing 5 more years of Late Night instead of moving to Fox, nor does he regret his incarnation of The Tonight Show. Leno hosted his second reincarnation of The Tonight Show until February 2014, when Jimmy Fallon took over the hosting duties. Fallon's credibility with younger viewers and presence online was why NBC instituted the change, which was announced only 3 years following O'Brien's departure. During the show that aired on the day of the announcement, O'Brien congratulated Fallon, stating, "Jimmy is the perfect guy to do it, and he's going to do a fantastic job." Though NBC made a considerable effort to scrub any references of O'Brien's brief tenure as The Tonight Show host both on-air and online, with one former blogger for NBC Sports noting a corporate policy banning of any mentioning of O'Brien, it was acknowledged by the network during the build-up to the 2014 transition from Leno to Fallon. A brief shot of O'Brien walking onto his Tonight Show set was displayed in an on-air promo chronicling the franchise's history, and Fallon referenced the conflict on his first Tonight Show episode, which he opened the show by saying, "I'm Jimmy Fallon, and I'll be your host for now." Of course, I wouldn't be here tonight if it weren't for the previous Tonight Show host, so I want to say thank you to Steve Allen, Jack Parr, Johnny Carson, Jay Leno, Conan O'Brien, and Jay Leno. Leno appeared on the Arsenio Hall Show on February 26, 2014 as a surprise guest to deliver the news that the revived program had been renewed by CBS TV for a second season. This proved to be premature, however, as Hall's program was indeed canceled on May 30th. Comedian Bill Maher paid tribute to Leno when the latter was inducted to the Television Hall of Fame, an honor bestowed upon the host in 2014 when he stepped down from The Tonight Show for a second time. A longtime friend of Leno, Maher complained that Leno was victimized by the press during the NBC fiasco. In a 2015 interview, Leno reiterated his stance that O'Brien's own performance led to his ouster from 11:35, and that he remained mystified by the suggestion that he should have refused the time slot when it was offered back to him, saying, "Why? Because Conan and I were good friends? No. At that point, it's a business decision. I'm sure it could have been handled differently, but I think it was a matter of letting things take its course. If Conan's ratings were to have been fine, it wouldn't have been an issue. It wouldn't have come up." In 2017, Leno again absolved himself, instead emphasizing that he kept The Tonight Show #1 after his return. He also addressed with equivocation the long-standing claim that his contract was the more expensive one to break. I mean, if I'm that smart, how did I lose that show in the first place? When he took over tonight, Fallon insisted that Leno is welcome to appear on the show anytime he wishes, saying, whatever he wants, he's got a stage. Leno made his first appearance as a guest on November 17, 2004, and has appeared several more times since. Additionally, Leno has stepped on to Late Night with Seth Meyers and The Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson. On February 13, 2015, Robert Smigel appeared in character as Triumph the Insult Comic Dog on The Jimmy Fallon Tonight Show to promote the Jack and Triumph show. During the interview, he joked about the conflict to a visibly nervous Fallon. "Listen, we love NBC. NBC, we kid, you know. NBC will always be the place where Jack and I got our start, and where they fucked Conan." As the controversy grew distant with time, formal acknowledgement of O'Brien's lengthy career at NBC became more common with the network. In 2017, mentions were made of the host in NBC's 90th anniversary special, and a display for him among all Tonight Show hosts appears in the ride of Race Through New York starring Jimmy Fallon at the Universal Studios, Florida. In conjunction with the 25th anniversary as a late-night host, it was announced that O'Brien, TBS, and NBC had come to an arrangement that would allow the entirety of O'Brien's late-night archives, totaling over 4,000 episodes, to be available in January 2019 via a state-of-the-art website dubbed Conan 25. On January 21st, 2010, NBC announced Leno will return to The Tonight Show. Jay Leno began his second tenure on March 1st of that year. The show moved to Stage 11 in Burbank, the former home of The Jay Leno Show, with a similar set and theme song to The Jay Leno Show. Tonight Show bandleader Kevin Eubanks announced on April 12th he'd be leaving The Tonight Show after 18 years with Leno. Eubanks' replacement was former American Idol musical director Ricky Minor. Minor composed a new theme when the show was taken over. On July 1st, Variety reported that only 6 months into its second life, Leno's Tonight Show posted its lowest ratings since 1992. By September, Leno's ratings in the adults 18 to 49 demographics had fallen below those of O'Brien, who had hosted The Tonight Show a year prior. In October 2010, David Letterman's program beat Leno's program for the first time since Leno returned to hosting The Tonight Show. By May, Leno regained the lead and held it since then. However, by August of 2012, the Los Angeles Times was reporting that The Tonight Show was in serious trouble for a number of reasons, most notably that NBC was losing money. While Leno offered to take a pay cut, at least 24 members of the staff were laid off. By March of 2013, there was rumors that NBC would have Jay Leno, who had been hosting late night since 2009, succeeded O'Brien, become the next host of The Tonight Show when Leno's current contract ended in 2014, and NBC would move the show back to New York for the first time in over 40 years. On May 13, 2013, during its fall upfront presentation, NBC confirmed Fallon would take over The Tonight Show beginning on February 17th of 2014. Seth Meyers, in turn, would leave Saturday Night Live and take over Fallon's time slot. Leno's final show on The Tonight Show was February 6, 2014. Per the deal of his terms with NBC, his staff was paid through September of 2014. Leno wrapped up the night before the 2014 Sochi Winter Olympics, which began on February 7th. Fallon took over The Tonight Show on February 17th. Leno himself would later appear multiple times on Jimmy Fallon's Tonight Show. During the last year with Leno as host, The Tonight Show cost about $1.7 million a week to produce. With 45 weeks of annual production, that amounted to about $76.5 million, excluding the salary for Leno and the show's top producers. On February 6, 2014, Leno hosted his final show, which featured several pre-taped well wishes from a variety of celebrities, including Steve Carell, President Barack Obama, and offered Leno an ambassadorship to Antarctica. Hopefully you have a warm coat, funny man. Appearing as Leno's final guests were Billy Crystal, who was Leno's first guest in 1992, and Garth Brooks. Crystal surprised Leno by leading an onstage sing-along of So Long Farewell from The Sound of Music, with lyrics from the occasional performed by special guests Jack Black, Kim Kardashian, Chris Paul, Sheryl Crow, Jim Parsons, Carol Burnett, and Oprah Winfrey. Brooks performed his touching song The Dance at Leno's request before closing out the show with a rousing Friends in Low Places. In closing the greatest 22 years of my life, Leno turned emotional in his final remarks, calling himself the luckiest guy in the world. I got to meet presidents, astronauts, and movie stars. Leno also thanked the audience as well as his staff, who became his family after the death of his parents and his brother early in his Tonight tenure. Needless to say, Jay Leno's second goodbye wasn't as celebrated as his first time saying farewell. The battle he had created forcing Conan out hurt him big time with people and put a lot of pressure and worry on the man who'd be the next in line to host the Tonight Show, who had only been in the late-night game for only 5 years up to that point, and even then, was his future as secure as Conan's was? Well, considering that as of today he's still the host, I think it's safe to say that Jimmy Fallon didn't get quite the shoddy treatment from NBC that Conan did.
Welcome to The Tonight Show. I'm Jimmy Fallon, and I'll be your host for now.